Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Got some legal updates for you here, and I got comments from a few attorneys within the XRP community regarding the SEC v. Ripple case. First, I'll be highlighting a quick update in terms of scheduling and when we might see the next briefs filed in the SEC v. Ripple case having to do with responses to motion for summary judgment. Turns out, according to one very well-known XRP community attorney, we really could be seeing that days sooner, at least days sooner than what we were actually expecting. And also, perhaps a bit more excitingly, an attorney within the XRP community says that in his humble opinion, which is the proper way to say the word opinion, I don't know why y'all say it weird, it makes sense to him that we'd see, if we're going to see settlement, that we'd actually see it by January 9th, 2023, or at least roughly around there. And I'll explain exactly why he has that perspective. But before going further, I do want to be clear that I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I'm not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. So we'll start with this from James K. Filan, who is an attorney within the XRP community, and he tweeted out the following: scheduling note. Sealed replies to summary judgment oppositions are due November 30th. Conferences, re redactions, due by December 2nd. Redacted replies due by December 5th. But all summary judgment pleadings were filed early. And then he wrote in all caps for a reason. He wrote, "This suggests redacted replies will be filed sometime this Friday," which would be December 2nd. And then he notes, "This is based on the fact that the redacted summary judgment motions were due on September 19th, but were filed on September 17th. And the redacted oppositions were due on October 24th, but were filed on October 21st. So expect the redacted replies to be filed early as well." Now, this I'm looking forward to because even if there's a certain amount redacted, typically there's still been a lot of meat, in terms of these documents, in terms of what the public can see. So, I mean, unless we get something outside the order of what we've seen for the last couple of years in this case, and everything's blacked out, there will probably be some key points that are redacted, but a lot of the actual arguments, presumably anyway, would be publicly available. So that's what I'd anticipate, just based on what I've seen for the last couple of years here. So that's good to know. Because I've been super curious to see what they're going to say, and these are the final things, as I understand it, that are going to be filed in this case in terms of legal briefs. So these replies, going to be some interesting stuff here. But we're getting closer to the end, and if the SEC, I'll tell you this, if the SEC is going to settle, and to some degree it's got to be on their minds, and I understand they're playing their cards, and you don't go to settlement unless you're backed so far into a corner that there is no other alternative. But you got to be thinking at this point, right? It's certainly a possibility. It's certainly crossing their mind, even if they're positioning themselves as if it's not, because you'd expect them to position themselves as though it's not. But then there was also this thread from a community member who goes by the name XRP Wing Commander Twaddle, who wrote, November 30th, summary judgment filed, but sealed, December 5th, unsealed. If Hinman emails are unsealed, would that put settlement in the highly likely category, and it looking almost certain that the SEC is looking to go the distance? Now, attorney Fred Rispoli responded and did correct one factual inaccuracy there, and he wrote, it's not unsealed. December 5th is not an unsealed date. It's the public filing date. So again, that's what I was just covering. That is the date that they're supposed to be filed by. But Attorney Filan, again, thinks that it's probable that we're actually going to see them filed on December 2nd, which is this Friday. So within just a few more days, we may actually have our hands on these things. And then Attorney Rispoli says, but with redactions on portions, the parties do not agree can be public. So that's what we'd be able to see. And again, I would anticipate most would be visible, although there would be certain things that we wouldn't get our hands on, but that's how it's been for, again, the last 2 years. That wouldn't surprise me. And then Attorney Rispoli says, SEC unlikely to agree to make Hinman emails public without a court order. And that ruling isn't until after the January 9th sealing response motions. So pause to note here, in terms of the probability of the Bill Hinman Ethereum free pass emails resulting in settlement, that's actually still something that, in my opinion, is on the email. On the email, my brain just broke. I just misspoke. I was looking at a separate word. It's something that's on the table, but it doesn't mean that it was going to happen now, because understand that the SEC, yes, they handed over the Billy Boy Hinman, Ethereum free pass emails, so that made some people think, oh, they really don't care what's in them. I took a different approach, especially after reading what Brad Garlinghouse had to say and Stuart Alderati, Ripple's general counsel, had to say. They said there's some shocking stuff in there, and just wait until it gets out. So there's some really, truly damning stuff in there. I don't think that Brad Garlinghouse and Stuart Alderati would just make that up, but the SEC handed that over because handing that over doesn't mean that the public, you and I, will ever get to see those documents necessarily. The judge hasn't ruled that the public gets to see that. They still have an opportunity to settle. And if they settle, what the hell do they care if some people know exactly what's in there, but they can't legally share it with anyone? So yeah, Brad Garlinghouse knows, and Stuart Alderati knows, and some others, but the SEC's got to be thinking, because they're a bunch of asshat pricks, well, what the hell do we care? Yeah, you can see it. You already know we're terrible people. What the hell's it matter? That's probably how they're looking at it, right? Yeah, so look at just how extra scummy we're even more scummy than you thought. Look at the Billy Boy Hinman Ethereum free pass emails, but you can't hand them out now, can you? So they probably don't care, at least now. But if this actually gets out, like, are they willing to let it get out? So let me go a little bit further, because we're going to get to the part where it's like, okay, here's why it makes sense for settlement to occur by January 9th, or at least somewhere thereabout. And this is where XRP Wing Commander Twaddle responds to Attorney Rispoli, and he says, thanks for clarifying, Fred. So you think these dates minimal effect on settlement or no settlement? So he's asking, I think that's kind of like a broken sentence, but he's asking, are these dates that cited here that are relevant to the SEC v. Ripple case, to what degree is it impactful in terms of settlement or no settlement in the case? And Attorney Rispoli's opinion is the following. He wrote, minimal. I don't think SEC settles until it has to. To me, that is most likely when, number one, emails go public, number two, SEC experts are excluded, or three, SEC loss at summary judgment. Looking at number one is earliest possibility in late January / February 2023. And so I was a little bit surprised by point number one that he made there, because again, he said, he doesn't think the SEC would settle until the Bill Hinman emails go public. And I'm thinking, well, when they're public, that's when the cat's out the bag. Then why would that make them more likely to settle? And I still don't really understand. I did ask him, so I wrote, wouldn't the SEC be more likely to settle before the Hinman emails are out in the public, since presumably they would prefer the public not to see them? And I appreciate that Attorney Rispoli responded, and he wrote, presumably. But there's been a lot of reasons I thought SEC would have been likely to settle by now. Yeah, and that's totally fair. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that all of us, many of us anyway, have been speculating that the SEC would have settled by now. Although I'm still not completely clear on why he thinks that it's more likely the SEC would settle after the emails are out, unless he mistyped that and he didn't catch what I was getting at. I'm not really sure, though. But this is where Attorney Bill Morgan jumped in, member of the XRP community, and I happen to pretty strongly agree with it. Like, to me, this makes sense here. He wrote, I can see why you may be more doubtful. This is to Attorney Rispoli. Attorney Morgan says, I can see why you may be more doubtful, but I still think the original intuition of John Deaton was correct, that they would trigger settlement, so the Hinman emails, and the Garlinghouse and Alderati tweets about the Hinman documents made clear they were good for Ripple and shameful for the SEC. Yeah, and to me, that still makes sense. Again, just because the SEC gave all of this information as per court order to Ripple doesn't mean that there's not horrendous stuff in that. It's just like, to what degree does it, to what degree is it going to impact the case? It depends on how things go. And I've talked about that ad nauseum, so not to get that into that again in this particular video. But there's a lot of moving parts to this, obviously. And then in a separate tweet, Attorney Morgan also wrote the following. The Hinman emails will not go public before January 9th, which is why I tweeted recently that if preventing their public disclosure is a big enough deal for the SEC to settle, it has to settle by January 9th or shortly after then, before Judge Torres rules on the sealing and redaction issues. So around that date, so presumably it would be before that. I mean, technically, Attorney Morgan's saying, okay, could go after that, but they don't know exactly when Judge Torres is going to rule. So if they go after the 9th, even if Judge Torres hasn't ruled by that point, you're kind of risking it because that could come out at any time, right? So that's why I'm still thinking by January 9th, if they haven't settled, then they really just don't give a damn about those emails. And if that happens, that happens. And admittedly, I was one of the people I think a lot of us have felt this way, but I was just thinking, the SEC really doesn't want this to come public. But it was totally reasonable to speculate that, and I still do speculate that, because they fought so hard to prevent these emails from getting in the hands of anyone else, right? They certainly don't want them in the hands of the public. There's nothing else in this case that the SEC fought so hard for, and they failed, but there's nothing that even comes close in terms of fighting to that degree. So, I don't know. I'm just saying, in terms of settlement, according to Attorney Morgan, and it makes sense to me, if they're going to settle as a result of the Billy Boy Hinman Ethereum free pass emails, we're going to know inside of roughly a month and a half. Within the next, just call it roughly 6 weeks, we're going to know. But if they really haven't by then, I'll give up at that point. Well, how could I not? I mean, if if that date passes, I'm just going to be like, okay. Well, let me a little caveat on there. If they settle, I'll just say that it won't be because of the Hinman emails at that point. Not that they necessarily wouldn't settle, but it sure as hell I don't think would be because of the Hinman emails, because they'd be out by then, Oh, man, what a train wreck this whole thing is. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.